This last slidecast of this topic is all about contract interpretation. Now here's an extract from NZS 3910, and you can see that while this version is written in what's called plain English, it is still quite a complicated piece of writing, and students find it really hard to understand this type of writing. Now this is a plain English document. In the past it was even worse. It had all sorts of thereins and thereofs and all sorts of stuff. You can see there's a there under there that sort of creep through. So what you need to do with these is you need to break them into little bits. So in a measure and value contract, okay, you understand what that is. The contractor shall carry out work described in the contract document, so you understand that, and fulfill his obligations. So all this is saying is that the contractor shall do what he's supposed to do under the contract document. So a lot of the stuff is very obvious when you translate it, but because it's a legal document, it needs to be very clear and very clear about what it's talking about. So that's why the form is so complicated. It is saying very simple things, but it's saying them in a very precise way. Keep that in mind when you're looking at it. You may read something and after a while you think, oh, all they're saying is this, why don't they say it like that? Okay, well maybe I've got it wrong. You haven't. It's just that the nature of a contract means that they need to be very, very specific. Okay, and there are some rules about reading a contract. Okay, the document is the true record of agreement. So once you've put together a contract document, we'll talk about this in the following slidecasts, it is the true record of agreement. If it's not in the contract document, then it wasn't part of the agreement. You can't just say, oh, but what I meant was that you should do this, this and this. That's fine, that's what you think, but it's not. If it's not in the contract document, it's not what was part of the contract agreement. Specific statements over all general statements. So in the contract, the way contracts work is they are composed of what's called general statements, which are already printed for you, if you like, and specific statements, which are ones that are specific to the project and which are written by the person preparing the contract. So for example, we have what's called specifications. Okay, what they do is instead of having to give every detail about every bolt, you know, what material it's made out of, how the material is supposed to be tested, what the thread size is and things like that. There are what's called standard specifications, and they say all of this stuff. So all you do is you say the bolt shall be as per NZS, New Zealand Standard, such and such. And then all of that stuff about the size of the bolt, the materials used, how it's supposed to be tested, what the thread is, how big the head's supposed to be, all that stuff is now part of the contract. You don't have to write it down. So it's a general statement. So if you say all fittings to be stainless steel in a standard specification, but the drawing shows a fitting or a bracket as galvanized steel, the drawings are specific. Someone's actually sat down and drawn the drawings for that contract, and that is therefore a specific condition. The specific condition overrules the general condition. The specific condition was written for the contract. The general condition is just something you pull off a shelf and stick into the contract. Therefore, the specific overrules the general. Privity of contract. That means that the contract rights and liabilities apply only to the parties to the contract. Now there's a bit of a tricky thing about this, because in an engineering contract there is a third person, the engineer, who is appointed to the contract, and he is given rights and rights under the contract. Okay, he is the representative of the client and the contractor, so he has specific rights. So privity of contract in an engineering contract is a little bit more complicated than most other contracts in that there is a third party there. However, he doesn't have liabilities under it. Okay, so if he makes a bad decision, the contractor cannot sue him for it. If there's a bad decision made by the engineer, the contractor can only sue the client for it, and then the client might sue the engineer for it. So, you know, it'll come back to him sooner or later, but there is no contractual relationship between the contractor and the engineer, and so therefore there is no liability between the engineer. A liability is you owe someone something. So if you make a mistake, you owe them whatever it takes to fix it. An express term is something that is specifically stated in the contract words. The road shall be 4 meters wide is a specific statement. An implied term is assumed from statutes or courts. It is assumed that you shall take every measure to make sure people don't get killed on your site, because there's the Health and Safety and Employment Act that says you're responsible for the site of work and to make sure that people are safe. It doesn't say in the contract, or it may not say in the contract, that you are responsible for the people that are on the site of work, but there is a law that says you are, so therefore it is an implied term of the contract, and therefore it is part of the contract agreement. So it takes a bit of doing to get your head around this legal talk. In a way, engineers are part lawyers. This is the legal part of it that you need to get your heads around. Remember that legal stuff is, they state very simple things in very complicated ways, and they have to do that because they need to be very specific.